So I also want to welcome you all to this event on governance and human rights in Afghanistan. Uh, I, I guess I don't need to introduce myself because Dean Weish already did so. I'm honored to serve as moderator for this event in which we hope to address important and pressing questions like what can the international community do to support women's human rights in Afghanistan? To what extent is the Taliban's approach to Islam a reasonable or well-founded interpretation of Islamic law? What could an effective and humane government look like in Afghanistan? And what lessons can be learned for US foreign policy from the war in Afghanistan? So very easy questions that should take, 5 minutes each to address. So we are privileged to have three renowned and wonderful Afghan panelists to share their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences with us. And I will start by introducing each of our speakers, and then they will speak for 10 to 15 minutes maximum. They've kindly agreed to speak for 15 minutes maximum to allow for some questions and exchange. I will let them know when they have about 2 minutes left. I'm not sure about how we will do that with Mr. Moheq. Maybe Mr. Mosleh can text him, or we can find some way of letting him know. Okay, or I can let him know that way. Speaking of which, Mr. Mosleh, are you able to hear us? Moheq, sorry, Mr. Moheq, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I hear you, but the host is not allowing me to open the video.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. We're glad to have your voice and picture with us. So I'm going to start by introducing Ms. Nahid Farid, who is an Afghan parliamentarian in exile and was chairperson of the House Standing Committee for Women's Affairs. She's a professional specialist at Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs and an advisory board member of the U.S. Afghanistan Democratic Peace and Prosperity Council. She was elected to parliament in 2010 as the youngest ever politician and lawmaker in Afghanistan, and she has worked tirelessly to engage Afghan youth and women in the nation's political process. She is a George Washington University alumna, Forbes magazine awardee, model citizen of Grassroots Diplomat magazine, and an Italian Distinctive Brave Knight medalist. Since the Taliban takeover in August of 2021, she's spoken in numerous places, including at the UN, the UK Parliament, the EU Parliament, the US Congress, and the media to advocate the matter of human rights in Afghanistan. She will speak about the human rights situation in Afghanistan, focusing on women's human rights challenges and recent developments. The next speaker will be Mr. Mohammad Moheq, who currently serves as editor-in-chief of the Hasht-e-Sub Daily News magazine. He has served in various roles for the previous Afghan government, including as ambassador of Afghanistan in Cairo from 2016 to 2018, as member of the Center for Strategic Studies at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and as cultural and social advisor for the President's Office from 2014 to 2016. He was a professor of Islamic studies at Herat University and has published numerous books and articles challenging stereotypical interpretations of Islam and pushing for more liberal and humanist approaches. He studied Islamic studies in Herat University, Ferdowsi University of Mashhad, and Cairo University of Egypt. He will address the roots of religious extremism and the Taliban's interpretation of Islam. Mr. Wakil Musleh is currently a visiting scholar here at the University of Baltimore and Maryland's School of Law. From 2019 until 2020, he was a senior legal expert at the Ministry of Economy as part of a World Bank project in Kabul, while serving as an adjunct professor of law at Istiklal University in Kabul. His other roles have included serving as a judicial training specialist for USAID's Rule of Law project in Kabul and as a defense attorney and legal advisor for Women for Afghan Women in Mazar-e-Sharif, Afghanistan. Mr. Musleh established a People's Council at his hometown province in 2021, through which he worked to engage youth on anti-corruption activities, making an effort to make the local government and members of parliament accountable. He has a master's in governance and rule of law from Ohio Northern University and has published articles on social and legal issues, including governance reform and anti-corruption. We want to particularly warmly welcome Mr. Musleh and thank him for his efforts to put together this entire event for all of us to have this opportunity to learn from all three renowned Afghan panelists. And he is going to provide a brief history of governance in Afghanistan, focusing on why governments have not worked or the state has failed, and to propose a way forward. So with that introduction, we will now turn to Ms. Farid for her remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, thank you for wonderful introduction. It's an honor and pleasure to be speaking here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for keeping Afghanistan as a priority for this event. Thank you for letting Afghans who have been evacuated after the fall of Afghanistan and Taliban using the state. Thank you so much for this is a symbol of how we welcome a society that have been desperately in need of support in the United States. As was mentioned in the introduction, my name is Nahid Farid. I served in Afghanistan Parliament for more than a decade. For 2 times I got elected. And throughout the time I was working in Afghanistan Parliament, my priority was education and education for girls. Because it happened to me because I was under Taliban rule in 1996 to 2001 as a teenager. And it was hard for me not to have the right to study. I was using my brother's book to continue my education, and seeing my constituency and women who voted to me, who elected me, who counted on me, who wanted to be by their side at this time of greatest need that they have, and I'm not with them. It is hard. It is hard that I could not help them and be by their side at this time. On a personal note, it was the most tragic moment of my life, choosing between 2 unwanted, unsolicited options of staying in fear in Afghanistan while Taliban were approaching my hometown, or leaving everything behind. Leaving everything behind, maybe something private, it's home, it's your office. It is okay, but if you leave your constituency behind, it is quite tragic. And since then, I came to the US. I started the advocacy for Afghan women and human rights in different platforms, and joined the Princeton University, the same as your university. They opened the door for newcomers, and we joined established Afghanistan Policy Lab. We do the policy work, targeted policy work there. Let me start by the important issue of why women and women's rights and focusing on women of Afghanistan is important. It is important because, first of all, looking to the issue of women of Afghanistan from a global perspective, from an international overview, is important. It is important because what happened in Afghanistan can happen anywhere in the world. A group of extremists, a group of fundamentalists, a group of terrorists can overthrow a democratically elected government and erase the hard-won gains and achievements of the entire society just in matter of hours, like what happened in Afghanistan. And we have to stop that from spreading into the world, because with the democratic backsliding that we face in the world, that with the issue of growing of authoritarian regimes that we see It's happening all over the world. We have to make sure democracies survive. We have to make sure minorities, women benefit from democracies and freedom. And that's why looking to the issue of Afghan women as students, as professors, as people who want to bring change to the future of the world is important. I'm really grateful for your participation and thank you so much for joining this panel. It's also important because we know authoritarian regimes like Taliban are bounded, are supporting each other. Like Taliban have received the support from Russian government. The first economic move the Taliban had was with Russian government of oil and trade and wheat trade. And this happened like right after the Taliban takeover. You saw Chinese oil extraction trade agreement with the Taliban few days ago. You see how Ayatollahs in Iran are supporting Taliban ideology. And I think you see how China and CCP is also supporting the Taliban. And they're all built on patriarchy. They're all built on misogyny. They all have male-dominant governance because they all see women as a threat to the pursuit of their power, to the pursuit of their authority. They know that if women get educated, if women get empowerment, they definitely demand the right of the whole society. But at the same time, women of Afghanistan, women of Iran, they're resisting, they're pushing back. They're pushing back. They're ready to die for their values in the streets of Kabul, Herat, Tehran, and all cities of Afghanistan and Iran. Women are pushing back. Women of Afghanistan are fighting in different fronts. They are fighting in the public front. They get arrested. They get disappeared. They get beaten, and they continue to resist. They also fight domestically at home because we are having a very male-dominant society. Men's priority is not girls' education. Many of the families in Afghanistan, they fight domestically to continue to demand their rights domestically. And in another front that they are fighting is economically. Women of Afghanistan are fighting, pushing to survive their families. We have women who literally sell their kidneys so their children don't go hungry, while their husbands are selling their daughters for marriage. So this is the level of resistance that we see from women of Afghanistan that we have to recognize and we have to understand. We have to educate ourselves and we have to support. Because as people, as scholars, as students, as government elected officials, as professors, we all are bounded in our common push for a better tomorrow. And that tomorrow is related to how we deal with issues like Afghanistan. We say we don't care because we are living in a free society, or we say, no, we have to have a free world. We have to push democracies because of the health and well-being and vibrancy of democracies all over the world. We have to help democracies survive or help people get their freedom. So the situation on the ground, stop me anytime that you want. Then I will touch base on the issues later. So on the issues related to the situation on the ground, so Taliban, if you saw, it's all over the news that they stopped women from education, all level, elementary, secondary, high school, universities, private, public. So women do not have the right to study. Women do not have the right to work. Even women in the medical background, they cannot continue their administrative activities. And this happened last December. On 20th and 24th, they issued 2 decrees against women saying women have no right to get out, no matter what kind of problem they have, even if there is a health problem, they have to have their male chaperone with them to leave the home. So it is hard. It is hard because in 1996, I was a teenager. I did not have the background of living in a free and vibrant society for 20 years. But the baby girl who was born in 2001, right after the freedom, is 22 years old now. The entire life of that woman was full of experiences living under a very vibrant and free society, experiencing and exercising freedom and access to the basic rights. It's hard for her saying, you cannot go to the school, you cannot do anything because you are a woman. And this is happening in Afghanistan. That's why it's a torture it's a daily torture that women of Afghanistan are experiencing on a daily basis, and they continue to resist. And that's not just women. I just want to touch base on how hard is the situation for everyone in Afghanistan. Taliban are engaged with ethnic cleansing. Taliban are engaged with forced displacement, with the public execution, and name it. So many forms of violations of human rights are happening right now in Afghanistan. And the worst part, ladies and gentlemen, is that media coverage of all those atrocities that are happening in Afghanistan is stopped. We don't hear because there is no independent media or an institution to authenticate, to document, to report that what is happening in the country. And this is really depressing to hear that. Unfortunately, this is not happening. I hear from my constituency, Mr. Musleh hears from his constituency that this is happening and we cannot authenticate, we cannot find out enough evidence about it, and people will forget that a group of people have been killed because of their ethnicity, or a group of people have been killed because they fought against the Taliban, or they resisted against the Taliban. Another aspect is the economy that is crumbling. The banking system is at the brink of collapse. If you want to go to a bank asking for your money, they just give you $200. That's it, no matter how much money you have in your bank account, because the country is not having enough cash. People are taking cash out because of the situation and the economic situation that the country is experiencing. And we have the unprecedented brain drain, unprecedented poverty, like 30 million of people, according to the World Bank, are experiencing poverty in Afghanistan. And we have like 35 million population in the country, like majority, around 80% of people are experiencing this situation and experiencing the poverty. Unemployment is also something obvious because of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So many organizations attached to the withdrawal also withdraw from the country. So there is no enough job for the people who can work. Forget about people who cannot work, including women. And this is the situation. The Taliban are systematically engaging in ethnic cleansing and torture and imprisonment of different people, including women. And this is really difficult to talk about, because as a woman, it is hard for me to bring this every time and say that how the situation is. But we call it a complete gender apartheid that Taliban are imposing on women. Gender apartheid because women are pushing to the subordinate level of the society, because Taliban are trying to control the minds and the bodies of women, because Taliban want to see their future in a radicalized society. And if they let women get education, they won't let their children to go and join Taliban. So a radicalized society for the Taliban means they continue to stay in power. So girls' education is not something ideologic. It's something very political for the Taliban. They want to keep the country more in a uneducated situation so they can continue to rule the country. I want to stop here. I definitely believe it will be a discussion afterward, and I will definitely welcome any question. Thank you so much once again for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farid, for sharing with us your experience. There's nothing like hearing from somebody who has lived, what you've lived, and it's really quite special for us to be able to hear from you. And I imagine it's very difficult to have to do this over and over again. So thank you very much for being here with us. So now we're going to turn to Mr. Mohammad Moheq, who will share with us some thoughts about the roots of religious extremism and the Taliban's interpretation of Islam. So thank you very much, Mr. Moheq.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be with you, and thanks for the Center of the University to providing this opportunity for me to speak about one challenging and important issue right now in our region, in our country. And I'm happy that my friend Ms. Nahid Farid and my friend Musleh are also participating in the same program. We try to put some points and clarify the picture about the Afghanistan situation. Regarding the subject about the Taliban roots and especially about the Taliban's ideology roots, I prefer to go back a little bit to our civilizational history. During more than 1,000 years, we had an internal conflict between different sects and schools of Islamic thoughts, and we divide them into two branches. One is the rationalist groups like Mu'tazili, like Hanafi school, like some Shia and some Shafi'is. But we had the other side, another group. They were following the literalist interpretation of Islam and resisting against any rationalism approach. So they were usually, the second group, they were usually a minority in Islamic civilization. They were not in the center, they were in the margin, criticizing some civilizational efforts, like when Muslims tried in 3rd and 4th century of Islamic calendar to translate the Greek heritage and the Persian heritage and the Indian hiterage in philosophical field or another scientific fields. The literalist and conservative groups were resisting against that and didn't allow the Islamic society to be engaged with the non-Muslim cultures or civilizations. But they couldn't take the leadership of Islamic societies until the last century. What happened in last century? We have to open another chapter when the Muslim societies faced the new experience with the new or modern era, when they discovered that the Western civilization is stronger and have more achievements, especially in industry, in some scientific and also philosophical fields. In 19th century, many Muslim scholars and some politicians, some leaders decided to learn from Western civilization. They sent some students to France, to UK, to Germany, to other countries to learn about the law, about something about Orientalism. Studies were done there, and also something about management, about modernization of the government, and new methods of leadership. In end of 19th century, when the confrontation or conflict between two superpowers like Great Britain in one side and Tsar Russian Empire in the other side, the conflict was going up and increasing. They interfere in the internal interactions between Muslim countries in subcontinent, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Turkey, and in Egypt, in North Africa. And in beginning of the 20th century, there was support of some conservative approach by British Empire, promising some conservative groups that if they make a cooperation with them, especially in Middle East, against the Ottoman Empire, they will recognize them as the leaders of Muslim or Islamic world, like Sharif Hussein in Mecca and Malik Fuad or King Fuad in Egypt, and some other politicians. One result of this efforts was that the Islamic, the political Islam was born, especially in 1920s, when Mustafa Kemal Atatürk canceled the Caliphate system in Turkey and established a republic or modern government. One movement started in many places in the Islamic world under the name of Islamic Khilafat. In India, in Egypt, in Syria, in Arab Peninsula. So many leaders were looking for, or their ambition was to be the next Khalifa or next Muslim emperor for Islamic empire. One movement was established in that time called Muslim Brotherhood in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna in Egypt, and it was supported by the King of Egypt at that time, indirectly also by British embassy in that time. And after a while, in 1930s, there was a cooperation between Saudi family in Arab Peninsula, also with British government. So they supported the new fundamentalism of Islam, and especially when the term we use it, political Islam. The same, in the parallel time, the same group was born in subcontinent in India and Pakistan, and a party was established by Abu al al-Mawdudi, who is the godfather fundamentalism for Muslim movements in 20th century. The second person was very famous and also influential to spread the extremism among Muslim societies was Sayyid Qutb, and he was inspired by Abu al al-Mawdudi. Another factor was effective in this process a madrasa or a school was established in 19th century in the subcontinent called Darul Uloom of Deoband. Deoband is a city, a small city in India. After a while, this school spread a new thought or ideology. And now we say it Deobandism. And Deobandism is like a conservative resistance against any modernization in Islamic societies. When the Pakistan was established after the Second World War, a base of Islamic ideology and Islamic identity, and it was in conflict with Indian government. They used these ideologies, the Muslim Brotherhood and Deobandism, as a weapon against non-Muslims and against liberal groups, against the left-wing groups. We say it in Farsi, socialist or socialist. So the new version of Deobandism was made after that, after 1950s, especially from 1960s. They started to get closer to Saudi Arabia, to Gulf countries, and to absorb some money from there to support these schools. During the Cold War between the NATO and especially by leadership of the US, and the other side was Soviet Union. And during that time, the Western countries decided to support Islamic fundamentalism as a ally against communism and socialism movements, especially in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Arab countries, in Middle East, in Iran, in different places. So we witnessed a new wave of increasing the extremism and fundamentalism in 1970s, especially when General Ziaul Haq took the control of the Pakistan. And he was extremist and fundamentalist person with a strict approach of supporting the extremism. But that time, because he was against the Soviet Union, the US and the Europe, Western Europe countries were supporting him and not making any problem or any prohibition for his agenda in our region. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, it was a good opportunity for the rivals to make a trap for Soviet Union, and they supported many extremist groups to come to Afghanistan from Egypt, from Algeria, from Yemen, from Gulf countries, from Saudi Arabia. So they flew to Pakistan, to Peshawar, and they brought with them the new ideology, extremist ideology in Pakistan, and spread it among Afghans. So the Taliban was born in that environment, and their ideology, their thoughts are mixed up by Deobandism, by Salafism, which came from Arab countries, some elements from Muslim Brotherhood ideology, and some elements from international jihadism, which was produced by some groups in Egypt, like Jamaat Islami and Jihad Islami, and they established later Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So the Taliban are made from especially their ideology is made by Salafism, Deobandism, jihadism, and some elements from Pashtun culture, they say it, Pashtunwali. And when we analyze these elements, we can understand what phenomenon is the Taliban. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moheq, for a wonderful history of where Islamic extremism comes from. It's particularly interesting to hear about the influence of colonial powers in the development of this version of Islam that we see in Afghanistan. Thank you. Now we turn to Mr. Wakil Musleh for his remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. To speak before our Ustad. So for me, it's a difficult job to cherry pick all, like the main points for the almost 65 years governance history in Afghanistan, starting from Zahir Shah, King Zahir Shah in 1933 all the way to 1973. I touch base on Zahir Shah kingdom monarchy because he has been considered as a kind of model liberal democracy, especially his last decade of Zahir Shah was being called as a liberal democracy for Afghanistan, because since then we didn't even like Afghanistan went to a big turmoil and bad and harsh days. So that's why the people believe that the Zahir Shah's time was stable and secure time. Even the United Nations actually calls the Zahir Shah's period as a stable and peaceful time. So Zahir Shah actually becomes king in 1933. So he brings a semblance of stability to the country. So when he becomes actually a king, or he reigns the monarchy, he is 19 years old. And literally his two uncles, Hashim Khan and Shah Mahmud Khan, is ruling the country. So Shah Mahmud Khan, Hashim Khan, for the first 16 years, so he had a very depressing and suppressing rule, and so he was oppressing freedom and freedom of media, and also the people didn't have a role in the government. But when his another uncle, Shah Mahmud Khan, becomes the prime minister of King Zahir Shah's reign, so he is a moderate person. He brings much reform, and he for the first time he establishes the Kabul University in Kabul, and also he brings a lot of freedom to the media, and he gives actually for the first time in history why we believe the reign or the monarchy of King Zahir Shah survived for 40 years in Afghanistan, because of his decentralized policies and strategies by the Prime Minister Shah Mahmud Khan. So he literally, for the first time in the history of Afghanistan, decentralized the power, and launched the elections for mayors in the provinces, and also he launched the fair and transparent election for the first time in history in Afghanistan, and established a liberal parliament. Through that parliament, the parliament could make transparent and good laws that provided the fundamental and citizen rights to the citizens and the media. So his success points actually were were mainly stemming from two actually factors. One was the external and one was the internal. Though I'm going very, I'm doing fast forwarding because I have to talk, about focusing on Karzai and President Ashraf Ghani. So on the internal side, he decentralized the power. That was the main actually point. So he brought a lot of reforms in the actually, government structure, service delivering institutions. So he also established through actually, during his time, we had an economic growth. So money banks were established. The United Kingdom actually, as I called the Zahir Shah's term as a stable and peacetime, and people call it as a democracy of Zahir Shah. So is the external factor was he actually maintained a good relationship, a diplomatic relationship with the two Cold War sides, which was two superpowers, the US and the USSR actually, the Soviet Union. Actually, he could maintain this relationship, diplomatic relationship with these two sides of the Cold War. And also he signed a lot of friendship treaties with other countries. So that was actually the main points and the main success or gaining points of Zahir Shah, that he could survive for 40 years. His last decade of his kingdom was called the democracy of Zahir Shah. So after him, actually through a military coup, Dawood Khan becomes king. He actually, overthrows king when Zahir Shah was in a trip through a coup. He becomes not a king. Actually, he for the first time he calls himself as a president. He establishes a republic, but that republic was also unfortunately very centralized. It was like the name was a republic, but it was literally another monarchy. So so that centralization, too much centralization of the absolute power of the king actually made him at the end of the day, somehow, got killed by the other rebellion groups in the country. So it means that he spoiled all those, built relationships, diplomatic relationships with countries, and his foreign policy was very bad, especially, with the neighboring countries, with Pakistan. And his main point was in foreign policy was focusing on the Durand front line between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is really controversial and which has created a lot of tensions in the history, in the governance history of Afghanistan. Of course, it's a challenge now. It's still a challenge. So yeah, he cracks down his opponents, and but he proposes a new constitution, and that new constitution is also giving and providing an absolute power to the president. So coming to so I'm not talking about other periods, Nur Muhammad Taraki comes after him, Hafizullah Amin, Babra Qawma, Mujahideen, and the first period of Taliban. So it's a whole history. So you may Google it, or maybe, that you may talk, if you would like to talk further, so I would be at your service. So if we, since 2021, we established the interim, actually the transitional government of Afghanistan. President Hamid Karzai is becoming the president of Afghanistan. So through a conference called Bonn. So the conference was in Bonn city of Germany. And there was some miscalculations, for the, even from the first days when the Bonn established. For instance, there was a fraud with when the election happened, between those members, there was a fraud. Actually, Karzai had not secured the majority of the votes, but they eventually elected Karzai as the president of Afghanistan. Dr. Sator Sirat was the one who actually, from the Uzbek ethnicity of Afghanistan, he actually secured the majority of votes, but he was not elected. So that was one of the miscalculations. The other was, like they didn't get a lesson from the history of Afghanistan. They again designed a centralized republic government, which has been creating, problematic issue for Afghanistan, especially, in creation of fractions between the tribal leaders and also the ethnicities in Afghanistan. So we had a centralized republic and not holding actually the responsibles of civil war in Afghanistan. We had a long civil war in Afghanistan, but no one held the civil war responsibles or the people who engaged in civil war accountable. Like the South Africa, for instance, once they established their interim constitution, they established a Truth and Reconciliation Commission as well. Through that Reconciliation Commission, they brought those who engaged in apartheid in South Africa. They prosecuted those who didn't, for instance, who didn't confess for their crimes. The ones who had a full disclosure and the one who had commitment for the prosperity and peace of South Africa, they were given amnesty by that commission. And in the meantime, they had a restitution and reparation process for the victims of the families who had been victim in the within the apartheid actually time. And also they had another period called like lustration. They lustrated the whole like corrupt and also the people who had been engaging on apartheid from the government. So we didn't have this phase. Right after the Bonn Conference, we had to establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to hold the responsibles of civil war accountable and at least receive a commitment, a written commitment from them to engage in peace and prosperity in Afghanistan afterwards. We didn't do it. This was a great miscalculation. What was the failing factors in Karzai's presidency or administration? From the first time we had a poor constitution, during the constitution making, so it provided again, notwithstanding, the history of Afghanistan, again, it provided too much power and absolute power to the president. So the president had a broad authority, notwithstanding the separation of powers and also the authorities within the powers. And also we didn't have national red lines or national political strategies, so that in a time of hardship or maybe in a time of collapse, what would we do? The leaders and the political leaders could come together, for instance, on the red lines that, okay, this time when, for instance, a country invades Afghanistan, what are we gonna do? We didn't have this red lines, the great or the greater good of the country's red lines. We didn't have this because everyone was busy with parties' interests and also self-interests among our politicians, unfortunately. So this too much power for the president really suppressed the separation of powers according to the constitution. And also President Karzai, for the first time, prevented the establishment of constitutional law. So we didn't have the chance. Our constitutionalists for the first time proposed a constitutional law, but President Karzai said that no, it would be like it's gonna be like the national guardian of Iran. So it would be so authoritative. So let's create another, for instance, a commission instead of a constitutional power. So it created the crisis of judicial review within Afghanistan. And also during the period of Karzai, one of the big issue was corruption. So there was a huge and widespread corruption within Karzai government, President Karzai literally legitimized corruption through one of his remarks, public remarks. He said that whatever you want to get it, but spend it within the country. This was actually the experts call it as a looting bill, as if it's a looting bill that it actually like legitimized everyone to engage on corruption. There was fraud in elections, and then also he had a tribal ethnic government, but he had some good points as well. So he had a good for some point. He had built a good relationship with the neighboring countries, for instance, in terms of diplomatic relation with Pakistan and Iran, and even with the US, till the last years. But it got deteriorated with the US in the last days of his administration, but he was good enough in terms of his foreign policy. And also the service delivering institutions was created, some laws, and also the women were given a good presence in the society, and good laws for the society were enacted. So at the end of the day, he also had a peaceful transition to the Ashraf Ghani. So coming to the Ashraf Ghani time, when President Ashraf Ghani became the president of Afghanistan from 2014 to 2021, so he built actually an autocracy and monopolization of the power. He monopolized the whole power within 3 people. So that, the people were calling a 3-people republic. So it means that the name was the republic, but it was an autocracy. It was a kind of authoritarian regime. He monopolized the power. He created parallel institutions to somehow control the institutions. Zimbabwe says in the book of How Democracies Die. So when the president holds the power, and also when the president controls the judiciary and the executive and the parliament. So it means that the President Ashraf Ghani had his own people within the parliament, and also he was controlling the judiciary. He had appointed the chief justice. The chief justice was literally working for President Ashraf Ghani. So it means that we didn't have a separation of power. He didn't respect the separation of powers in Afghanistan. And it led to the tribal fractions, and he was really harsh, against his opponents. He cracks down, his opponents. As Dawood Khan, he pursued Dawood Khan policies in terms of his opponents within the country. And also he had some wrong military strategies. For instance, in terms of transferring the security responsibility from the US side to the Afghanistan government, ANA, Afghanistan National Army, and Afghanistan National Police. So even the experts said that, I'm concluding actually, so even the experts say that the experts were, I don't know if I can call myself as a governance expert, but I provided 14 governance reforming proposals to the government of Afghanistan, but no one was listening out because they were engaged in corruption and in their own personal team interests. The good, in terms of social justice, President Ashraf Ghani was thinking only about his own team. Only the ministers from his own team had was authorized to do this or that, but the ministers from other team, from his opponent team, didn't have the power. Their authorized, the authority or discretion power was diminished by President. We were also talking about new government. I'm just 1 minute. I'm concluding in 1 minute because it's very long,
Yeah, it's up to you. Can you just have less time to...
Okay. So, and also there were some, the NATO desires, the desires of NATO in terms of lustration of the experienced and old generals within our military. Since that happened, our military, the ANA, Afghanistan National Army, Afghanistan National Police, really weakened. It started weakening because the new people and the youth came in the system, and they didn't know, they didn't have the war experience. So in terms of the new government, what new government will work for Afghanistan, I still believe that a republic government will work for Afghanistan, but a decentralized government will work for Afghanistan. And if we make it elective mayors, if we have elective mayors, if we have elective provincial governors, and also if we have a liberal parliament. So if we consider the separation of powers and give the enough discretion and authoritative powers for the executive, parliament, and judiciary, so we could have a good government. And yeah, thank you so much.
I think that to have the opportunity, especially for students and also for law students and those of us who are interested in issues of comparative law and constitutional law, it's very interesting to hear about what you think led to failures and what you think is necessary for success in Afghanistan. I mean, even questions of what kind of transitional justice mechanisms should have been part of the process in Afghanistan. How should the Constitution be designed so that powers are separate and we have checks and balances? What role does corruption play in the ability of a state to function? And I think we, in the US, we thought many of these questions were resolved at the time the Constitution was written, but as you know, as law students, these are still issues that come up for us here in the United States. And so it's very interesting to hear how you think about it in another cultural and historical context. So thank you for sharing those remarks with us. I think that we covered many of the questions that the panel was designed to think about. One question which we did not talk about was sort of the lessons for US foreign policy of all of this. And so I want to open the floor for questions, but before I do that, I want to see if anyone on the panel wants to briefly remark on the lessons for US foreign policy of what has happened in Afghanistan.
I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. That's a very important question. So, benefits play a very important role in fighting. So what is the benefit of the United States in having a group like Taliban? Dealing with Taliban is much more easy for them than dealing with a government like President Nahid. That was a different phenomena. So this is something that we have to consider, that the United States has to think of how democratic government can help the vibrancy of democracy here in the United States. How it is important to deal with liberal governments and let the nations become developed than dealing with groups like the Taliban that may bring trouble. The US government can go there and kill one of the most important enemies of the US in downtown Kabul, or weighing it with the issue of long-term relations with nations. Afghanistan people feel abandoned. Very puzzling. US will be open up at the latest time of the development. US let the nation hope that on remember for little and more African from the combination and modern policy in that. That's shocking. How people have Afghanistan still very how people have Afghanistan still abandoned. Most educated people are having with little things, thinking that they live this way, live this. So this is the English. The training in the history of the longest war in Afghanistan. Admit that he was actually did that. The US stayed in Afghanistan. They could have had stayed for 3 years and politically told the military advisors just to keep the nation prosperous to the future.
And also the withdrawal could happen in a more smooth way, not in a irresponsible way. And also the Doha agreement with the Taliban that sidelined Afghanistan government. If you remember, it happened during the Foreign Minister, Secretary of State Pompeo. He signed the agreement with the Taliban leader while we had a government in Afghanistan. We had an elected government in the country. They sidelined the Afghanistan government, and it became an enmity and chaos between these two countries of Afghanistan and United States. At that time, I was part of the DPPC, Democratic Peace and Prosperity Council, to talk to your Congress, from our Congress, talk to your legal foreign policy committees, appropriation committees, talking to them saying how the nation of Afghanistan are feeling about the decision that you are sidelining the people of Afghanistan, the government of Afghanistan, having you deal with the Taliban, and Taliban have their conditions. You have also your conditions. Taliban say, surround the country to us, we will deal with you. We will not continue to have ties with Al-Qaeda. We will not attack United States. They continue to attack United States even after signing the deal. They still have their ties with Al-Qaeda. The fact that Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in downtown Kabul shows the fact that they still have this ties. So what is the reason that a group that is not representing the diversity, the reality, the civilization, the dignity of the nation of Afghanistan have been chosen over the nation of the country of Afghanistan that had a relatively stable government, although with all the problems. I just wanted to touch upon the issue Mr. Mosleh mentioned about democracy in Afghanistan. We all say, unfortunately, democracy failed in Afghanistan. No, democracy did not fail in Afghanistan. Those who practice democracy did not practice it well. President Ghani did not deal in a good way with Afghanistan parliament. We had three tasks: legislation, oversight, budgeting. In the budgeting, the budget of country will be decided by parliamentarians because we know what's going on in our constituency. We know what is the priority: schools, roads, medical facilities, things like that. He had his own budget. He didn't care about the budget that we were passing. About the oversight, he was telling to his minister, don't go to the parliament. Why are you accountable to the parliament? Don't go there. Regarding the legislation, we had our legislation, he had his own decrees. He had his own legal advisors. We had the electoral law, he had his own electoral law. We had our constitution law, he had his own constitution law. And this was all the parallel institutions that he established and unfortunately undermined democracy, undermined the practice of democracy in Afghanistan. And the last point is that a few days ago, actually yesterday, the mother of President Karzai died. It's all over the social media, and no one knows what's the name of her. We say, what's the name of the mother of the former president of Afghanistan who has been died? No one is saying that. It's a shame for the president to talk about his mother's name. So we are talking about a society that from the day a baby girl comes to the world, she's the daughter of someone, they don't call her name. It's a shame that they call her name in the public. When she gets married, they don't print her name in the invitation of the wedding. The daughter of someone got married, come here and get together for this celebration. When she gets pregnant, bring a baby, they don't put the mother's name in the national ID. And this is something we changed in the Commission of Women Affairs when I was a chair in Afghanistan Parliament. The father-in-law, the grandpa name is there, the father's name is there, the children's name is there, not the mother's name. And the mothers were saying, we want to have the ownership of our child. Put our name in the national ID of our kids. And then when this woman is dying, the wife of someone has been died, they don't write down the name of this woman in the tombstone, in the gravestone. So women are part of the lost generation that come to the world and go from the world. No one knows them because they don't have any identity. And we wanted to start from scratch, talking about the identity of women. We had legislations of putting mother's name in national ID, the law of elimination of violence against women, the law of protection of children, the law of labor law, electoral law to come to bring women into the public and defend their rights. And unfortunately, today, Taliban had 36 decrees all about women, all against women, all suppressing women. They don't want to deal with other and tackle with other multiple crises that the country is suffering, and they just focus on women because they have the agenda of radicalizing the nation of Afghanistan to survive.
Thank you. Professor Moheq, I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment on whatever you would like to comment on, or if you would like a more targeted question. I think one question that would be interesting to hear your views on is whether there's any room for more moderate interpretations of Islam in Afghanistan right now. So following up on Ms. Farid's comments about what's happening with women in Afghanistan, is there room, is there space for more moderate interpretations of Islam in Afghanistan?
Thank you. If we look at our in Afghanistan before the war, how was the situation in 1960s and early 70s? We had the university, and the girls were going there to study. We had the cinema. We had the artist, good musician from boys and girls. And there's big cities like Herat, like Kabul, like Mazar Sharif, some other like Nangarhar, Jalalabad, was developing gradually toward the modernization. There was not big influence of the conservative groups in that time, and the extremism was not a challenge for our society. So it means if there was not any intervene or any force from the outside of Afghanistan, and the people of Afghanistan was free to decide about their future, they have capacity for democracy, for liberal values, for I think not very fast, but slowly we are going to development in different levels, in the legislative field, and educational and political development. But the problem we experienced in Afghanistan during past 4 decades, it was the bigger forces were they were effective in Afghanistan situation, especially the leadership of the big waves in our region was in the US hands. We expect our friends in US government and US departments to review their policies toward Afghanistan. As Ms. Nahid also mentioned, I want to say that Afghans made some mistakes. We accept our responsibility toward what happened in Afghanistan, but it was not only the failures or the mistakes of Afghans. Our partners made same mistakes in corruption, in different areas, especially how they dealt with the terrorism and extremism in Afghanistan. Anyway, we still have chance to correct the mistakes, to make new agenda, new strategy to support the human rights, the rule of law, the woman situation in Afghanistan, and something else about Islam and Islamic or interpretation of Islam. We have a rich heritage about that. Within 2 centuries in all Islamic countries, hundreds and hundreds of books were published, how to make new interpretation of Islam based of moral values and based of knowledge and new philosophy, and which was fitting. We expected would be fitting with the modern era. It is not a big challenge for us. The big challenge is the political strategies and agenda. Afghanistan still is a battlefield between the superpowers, between the US, China, Russia, Pakistan, India, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. When they continue their agenda like that, to use Afghanistan ground as the battlefield, we as a vulnerable and fragile society, we are not able to resist against all of that big waves in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I realize that everyone has to go to class who is here, including me. So I want to thank our very excellent panelists today. I think this was extremely enlightening conversation. I hope the conversation does not end here. As Mr. Mosleh mentioned, he's here until at least the end of this academic year, and I'm sure he would love to speak with many of you. And if any of you want to talk about, perhaps Ms. Farid would be willing to speak with us another time about what maybe we could do to help support women's rights in Afghanistan. If there's something that we can do here at the law school, maybe some of you might be interested in working together to brainstorm about that. So thank you again to Mr. Mosleh for organizing the panel, and to our panelists for sharing their thoughts and perspectives with us, and to all of you for being here today, and also to Chris Stutz for her help in organizing the event. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.